welcome to another episode of Booked, a place to explore the realms of creativity. I'm joined today by Alex O'Connor, author of the Celestial Saga. How you doing?
Oh, hello. Thank you for having me. I am honored to be here. I've been looking forward to this ever since you first started coming up with the idea. Super exciting.
Oh, I'm excited too. This is really nice. It feels like everything's sort of coming together and it's becoming some tangible form rather than just this lofty idea. Um, so yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. I've recently, well, at the time of recording, I was going to pretend that we were recording this in February, but this is November 2024, and I've just finished reading Dawn of the Seekers, and I bloody loved it. It was so good. I applaud you because I am terrible for not being able to read sci-fi books. I'm a speed reader, and I find it difficult to sort of work my way through a book that's fantastical and has a lot of lore buried into it, and you do a really, really good job of walking the reader through. Okay, so this thing's happening, and this is why it's relevant. It's full of action. It's got interesting technology, and there are some really clear influences of like Star Trek and the Halo series, and I just loved it. So I'm not going to clap because I don't want to have a jarring noise in the recording, but I'm applauding you in my head. Thank you so much for writing this. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, like that was one of my main concerns when I was writing it. Is I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want it to feel like a textbook where I just like overload you with lore, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's like two characters having a conversation, and then all of a sudden the next like 2 or 5 pages is lore stuff, and then it goes back to the conversation, but you're like, wait, what were they talking about again? Now I have to go back. um I didn't want that. I've read books like that, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's no offense to, like, if that's your writing style, go for it, roll with it, but for me, at least, knowing the things that like I like to read, I didn't want to do that. So I spoon feed it. I give you just enough to know what's going on, and then maybe we'll revisit this at a later page. Maybe we won't. We'll find out. And that was kind of one of the things that I learned is like, at a few times I felt like I was like overloading with lore in certain
Mm-hmm.
areas, and I had to stop myself and be like, wait a minute. I've got a series planned out for this. I don't need to say everything right now. I just need to have enough to so that you have the understanding, and then we can build upon that as we go.
No, you've done a great job of that, and I think it's one of those things where when you're very excited to tell a story, you want to tell everybody everything, and it takes a lot of restraint to go, hang on, we can do this later. Do you take some of those ideas when you've sort of overloaded it, and do you put them aside for later, or do you hope to remember them?
Yeah, some of them I do. I do put aside for later.
Mm-hmm.
The story, I've had it in my head for 10 years, well, probably 11 years now.
Wow.
So it has been, my head has been a treasure trove of lore for this universe, and it's been nice. Kind of like, it's a freeing experience when I put it to a page and then get that page out there, because now I'm like, I don't have to worry about one day waking up and forgetting this idea that I've had for like 7 years or more. It's just it frees my mind up to be able to be
Yeah.
like, okay, now I can think about this. Now I have some more like mental capacity space to have something here. But I've also, at some point in time, probably in 2025 sometime, I'm hopefully going to be rolling out a website where it's kind of going to be like a think like Wikipedia, like a Wikipedia or Halopedia, somewhere where you can go and find
Oh
like
my
all of the
goodness.
lore for this, so I can go more in depth. It's like, hey, I just read about this in the book. I read a little bit about it. Now let me learn more. And you can go there, find like the complete timeline, the characters, ships, places,
Mm-hmm.
events, things like that.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That's such a good idea. Okay, so authors out there, if you are listening, we should do more of this. Okay? That would be very helpful for those who are chronically Googlers. Chronic Googlers? I like to Google things. I don't know if I'm allowed to say Google. I've said it now. Um, yes, that's a fantastic idea, and I love that so much. Have you got like a document or something where you've got all this information, or are you just hoping to hold on to it until the point that you sort of create the website?
I've got documents all over the place. I've got them on thumb drives. I've got them on my computer, my phone, notebooks, random pieces of paper scattered around boxes. It's all over the place. I've got it. It's organized chaos. It's the funny thing where it's like it may not look organized to anyone else, but I'm like, I know exactly where this piece of information is, where it's located, and I just need to find it.
Oh, I'm the same. I'm like, please don't tidy up that mess because I know that it's under that mug, and if you move that mug, I'm not going to know where it is anymore. Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It's like I'd like the journal that I use. So I normally like when I'm planning things, I'll write it all down on paper because I like doing that more than just looking at like the computer screen when I'm kind of
Mhm.
like planning out a chapter or something.
Yeah.
And so it's like if you look through this journal that I've got for the Celestial Saga right now, like it's a mess. Like you've got things that there's I don't think there's anything really in there from book one because I think I
Mhm.
bought it after book one. Um, but there's stuff in there from like Shadow of the Emperor, and there's stuff in there from like well, there's actually a ton of stuff in there for the third one, which I
Mhm.
am happy to announce will be coming out next fall, fall of 2025,
Oh,
and will
amazing.
be titled Celestial Saga: Brave New Galaxy.
Oh, I got goosebumps. It's That's gonna be me. I'm so excited. I'm very, very excited to read book two. Because I want to see how it goes. But because I like to read really quickly, I might wait until book three's come out and then read them back to back.
Yeah, no, no, I understand that 100%. Yeah,
If I could stop myself. But so when this episode comes out, then it'll be this fall,
correct.
in
Yeah, this
2025.
fall of
Mhm.
2025. Yeah, I'm hoping
Amazing.
by I'm hoping like February time frame. I'm either going to be uh, finished with it or mostly finished. Like I've got everything planned out.
Hmm.
It's just getting it onto paper in a way that that makes sense.
Excellent. The polishing stage.
Right. Exactly.
Hmm. Excellent. So, I know you mentioned that this series kind of started for you a long time ago, about around a
Yeah.
decade ago, and I confess I've already read your crafting the Celestial Saga, which is the behind the scenes of your creation of this series. For the listeners who haven't had the chance to look at that yet, how did this series start for you? Why did you begin telling this story?
Yeah. So I've always had a fascination with storytelling. Ever since like I was a young child. For a long time, I wanted to be a film director. Still want to do that at some point in time, but I'm not going to be able to do something with like a Hollywood style budget. So maybe something smaller, Celestial Saga related. You never know what I've got planned for this thing in the works.
I believe in you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So it's um, and so as a kid I was influenced a lot, like you had mentioned at the start. I was influenced a lot by the stories that I liked. So growing up I played a ton of Halo. I played started playing Mass Effect in high school because that's around the time that it was coming out.
Yeah.
um, and Star Wars, I've always been a fan of. Star Trek, I didn't actually learn to appreciate once I got a bit older, probably into my teenage years, because I'm watching it as a kid. I'm like, wow, this is a smarter science fiction show. I didn't really have as much of an interest in it as I did like after I grew up, when I could understand it more.
I see. Okay.
And yeah, so I I got my initial start with like doing fan fiction, and I know some people hate fan fiction, other people's love it. I think it's a wonderful tool to be
Hmm.
able to start writing, like especially if you have like an interest in writing or really just storytelling in general, because it's this great thing where if I did it a lot for Halo specifically. So if you're looking at something like the Halo universe, there's already rules that apply in that universe. So if you're writing something within that universe, you have to abide by those rules. Same thing happens like if you use an existing character from said universe, there's rules that apply to this character. You have to make sure that you're writing respectfully to the character and still keeping things like believable, something that they would do.
Yeah.
So as I was doing this, like just things started evolving over time. And I was thinking like maybe it was something I was writing like Halo related, Mass Effect related, Star Trek related, but eventually it started just kind of things clicked into place one day. I was like, what if I did my own thing? Like maybe I was writing something. I was like, well, I could write this for this, like this in this universe, or it could be my own universe. And here's the events that led up to that, and here's the events that happen after that, and then it just kind of spirals out of control after that.
Hmm.
And so that's where I think it's just a wonderful tool because it helps you, I think, hone or even unlock your creativity. Like this story has been inside of me this whole time, and I just needed something to be able to bring it out. So once I started exploring in other universes and realizing that, hey, I can play in this world, I can play by these rules, and people like what I have put out. Let me do something original in my eyes and see what happens.
Cool. So, what was the moment, or when was the moment where you thought, okay, this is me, this is my thing, this is my story, and I'm gonna put it out there? How did that take form?
Yeah, that was actually in my senior year of high school. I really wanted to go and do uh, game development, but
Hmm.
my problem was is like I wanted to be on like the writing side of it, and that's very hard to get into, especially if you have no work to show for yourself at the time.
Oh, I
Um,
bet. Yeah.
yeah, and uh, like visual arts, like paintings and drawings and stuff, I'm terrible at. I'm sure if I put in the time and effort, I could learn it over time, and that's still something I might like do in the future.
Hmm.
But at least it's not something that I have the talent for. Like my art that I view, like I can be artistic with words. That's where I feel comfortable. That's my realm.
Yeah.
Um, so like game art, I would have been terrible. Game development, I probably could have figured out, but after kind of learning more about what it was versus what the idea that I had in my head of what it was, I was like, probably not something that I would want to do. Um,
Uh, okay.
so, but at that time, I was thinking about what would make a cool game that I wanted to play, and I thought of something like, okay, it's got a single player mode, it's got a multiplayer mode, and here are like the characters of like Nova Team. Nova Team has been around for uh, you know probably over 10 years with stuff that
Wow.
I've been thinking of. I was like, okay, here's the main characters, like here's what they're doing, here's the objective, and I wrote down it was one piece of paper, front and back. I just wrote down like basic story ideas, how the game play would work, how the multiplayer would work, and so I'm sitting there in class and I hand it to a friend of mine. I was just like, hey, look over this. Would this be something you would play? And so I'm watching him, eyes go left to right as he's reading, and then
Hmm.
he flips it over, finishes it. He just looks up at me with wide eyes. He's like, yes. And it was at that point in time that I was like, I think I've really got something here. I need to start. I need to start really digging into this and seeing what I can come up with.
Wow.
So it was that was really like the key moment for me, knowing that I really had something good going, and I just needed to hone it, fine tune it, things like that.
Fascinating. So you said that you wanted to go into game development, and then you
Mm-hmm.
realized, okay, maybe that wasn't something that you were going to do. So when you came up with the story for this game, was it the change of heart with going down the sort of game development route that led you to turning it into a book, or was it just a gradual thing over time?
It was kind of both. So when I originally wrote it, it was very in like a kind of like script format because that's how I kind of envisioned it. I was like, okay, I've got the details in my head. Um, Obviously, the book goes into like details about what things look like, even like smell like in certain circumstances. But it when I was writing the game, it's like most of that was still in my head, like the script for it. Most of it was still in my head, and I just basically had the events that were playing out, like the cutscenes, if you will, or like main dialogue that you would find. And I just remember I was sitting on it for a while, and I was like, man, this is super unfortunate that I've got this now like finished script for Dawn of the Seekers.
Mm.
Um, that's never going to see the light of day because I'm like, no, I don't have the means or the resources to be able to uh, turn this into a game right now.
Mm.
And the the one thing that was this, and this might sound like egotistical of me or something, but it's like this is my story, so I really didn't want anyone else telling me what to do with it. And when you get into like making a game or making a movie, you're not the only one doing it. So there's other people that are doing giving input, saying, "Well, what if you did this on here, or what if you changed this event here?" And I had the whole saga planned out in my head. I was like, if we even deviate slightly from this, it's not going to make sense anymore later on, and it's going to completely change everything. So I remember I just got really depressed at that thought because I'm like, I really don't want um, anyone changing things about this or potentially changing things about this. So I sat on it. I'm like, I really have no idea what to do with it now. And one day I just ended up opening up Facebook, and there was an author by the name of Ben Galley. His post just randomly popped up on my feed. I have no idea why. It just did. And he was talking about how he got his start with self publishing. And I
Mm.
was reading it and I was like, huh, self publishing. Or like self publishing a book specifically. I was like, interesting. So I started looking into what he was talking about. I was like, oh, I can do this. And like through Amazon, I read what I wanted. I'm not going to be kept to any like strict dates because it's working on my time, and I keep 100% of the rights, which meant no one was telling me what to do with my own thing. And
Mm.
as soon as I read the post by him and then the kind of like a description on Amazon, I was like, oh, no, this is it. This is how I tell this story.
That's amazing. I don't think it's egotistical to want your art form to be solely from you. Um, I just want to make that clear. That doesn't seem it's perfectly understandable when you have something, and I've said it earlier. I don't know if it was before we were recording, but you pour your heart and soul into something, and to have somebody go, "We can't sell that," that is tough to hear. And if you have to put your priorities in the right place, right? So, if your priority, which it sounds like it is, was to get this story out there and written in the exact way that it needed to be presented to the world from your perspective because it's your creation. Um, Self-publishing is kind of the way to go because as you said, there's just no restrictions.
Right.
The only restriction is the one that you put on yourself, or perhaps sometimes when you go into a deal with a particular sort of platform like Amazon, sometimes you're restricted in some areas. But something that I've really I kind of discovered the self-publishing route in a very similar way. Is that I went onto Twitter and I was like, I'm still going to call it Twitter, by the way. Must.
100%.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially now. So I jumped on there because a friend of mine had just self-published a book, and I was like, "How did he do that?" It's because he had money. That's what I thought anyway. And he said, "Find your audience before you write your book." So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do that. I didn't really think anything of the self-publishing world. I thought, okay, so I have to get an agent, I have to do this. And then the more I learned about it, the more I thought, I don't know if I would want to go down the traditional route. And then I found hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands of self-published writers that are doing what they love for the passion and for the joy of it. And it sounds like that's what you found, is that you were able to continue your passion project in a way that was accessible to you. And I think it's really cool that you kind of stumbled upon the ability to be able to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. Like it is the best way to be able to express yourself the way that
Mm-hmm.
you want to. And I remembered at an old job of mine, one of my coworkers, when I was we were talking about kind of things we wanted to do in the future, and I was bringing up the story idea that I had and what I wanted to. At that time, I was still set on making it a game. one of them said like, "Oh, don't make your first game your baby because like if it goes wrong, then you're never going to do anything." But I elected to ignore that advice, and I'm really glad that I did because I've got Dawn of the Seekers was finally out of my head and into people's hands. Like 10 years later, I was like, I may never get this chance again, and like
Mhm.
if I publish something else first, and like people didn't like it, or maybe they like I don't know what would happen. Good thing is I don't have to worry about what happened because this is the path that I chose.
And
But I
you
was like,
did
no,
it.
yeah, I was like, this is the story that I want to roll with. I'm like, this is the story that I've wanted to tell for I 10 years. It's the thing. I think I put it in my first like about the author section for Dawn of the Seekers, where I was like I thanked friends and family like, hey, here's this thing that you've heard like snippets of, like broken snippets of a timeline throughout the years. Like here's the beginning, and we're like, thank you for joining me on this ride now. Like you can see like it wasn't just like broken snippets. Like yes, it was what I was sending you, but maybe here's what you read, or maybe it's like, oh, I read something else about this. Let's see how it plays in,
Wow. It
type
must
deal.
have
So
been emotional for you to be able to, like, when you put the I was going to say when you put the pen down, but you might have put the laptop down. I don't know, but whatever you finished
uh,
writing the
it's
first
both.
draft on,
Yeah,
that must have been emotional for you.
it was. It's a surreal experience, and even now, like on my personal accounts, I actually posted something the other day where I was like, sometimes I randomly think about the fact that I've written 2 books, and I feel proud of myself, and
You should.
it's just something that like brings me happiness throughout the day because like me, I've struggled a lot throughout life with like depression and stuff, so I haven't been
Hmm.
very kind to myself over the years, and that's something that I've definitely been working on getting better with. And I don't shy away from that too much in like comments that I post because I want people to know like, hey, if you're struggling, I see you, I was there, I'm still there, let's help each other and build each other up because there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It gets better, and I can now finally like I can finally say like, hey, it does get better. I'm not just saying that. Here's the proof of it, type
That's
thing.
good. I love that, and it really goes a long way, especially not just in the writing community, just in the wider community in general. But um, I see a lot within the sort of community of writers that are at the time of recording, it's Twitter. It might be whatever platform we all fly to at some point, but um, everyone has rough days, and sometimes it's easier when somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I also have had the same thing, and look, I'm doing well now," and it gives people hope. So, I'm glad that within your work there's hope, and also within your story as a person and as a writer. So this has been a really long journey for you, right? Did you say it's nearly a decade,
Right.
or around a decade? So what's the journey been like since book one finished? Have you been sort of scrabbling around trying to get the next one out because you're like the story continues, or are you having to sort of restrain yourself? How's that going?
So I started working on, well, I mean, like I know that it's something we've said a few times, but like I've had the entire like story for this planned out for 10 years now. So
Mhm.
even though like, oh, I just started working on book 2 last year, like okay, yep, on physically I have, but in my head, like I've had this thing like for a decade. Um, so I started working on it almost immediately after I finished book 1.
Mhm.
And I think it was funny. Someone had pointed out, like, "Dude, you're not even like book 2's or book 1 isn't even out yet, and you're already working on 2." And it's like, yes, um, or maybe that was about book 3, but no, I definitely started working on it like immediately afterwards, and I have had more fun writing the second one than I have in my entire life, like with writing.
Oh.
And I think part of that I was finally over the hurdle of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I finally, it was done, it was out there. I didn't have to work on it anymore because I'm like, well, I've been working on it for 10 years, really or like the entire story for 10 years. It's really like, yep, but it's also the first one's got to get out before I can tell the second one or the third one
Mm.
or the fourth one or so on and so forth. So that was probably the biggest surprise to me was how how quickly and how fun it was to jump into the second one because I could finally now tell the next part of the story. And I was so happy about that because I'm like, I just spent all this time, making sure that the first one was right to be able to get out there. And now I could finally sit down and spend some time and actually flesh out the ideas of the second one.
Mm.
Um, and I think changing it into a book really helped me to expand on that too, because there were you get a little bit about this in like crafting the Celestial Saga,
Yeah.
but also I've mentioned a few things. Like I had a rule of five. Like when I was thinking about it as like a game, I'm like there has to be five characters on the screen at any time
Hmm.
to be able to have, and that's why Nova Team. There's five people on the team, but
Oh.
once I started doing it in like going into a book, I was like, it doesn't have to be like that anymore. Like maybe there can only be four or three or one. And I got to play around with that a lot more in the second one because, well, the first one, like everything was set in stone. Like I had to do it the way that I did it. But some great changes to that is when I was thinking of it and like a game perspective, like the character of John Banks when he goes off to join the Eagle Squadron.
Mm-hmm.
I just immediately like the next page, it was like, hey, here's this new guy named Zero. Nobody knows anything about him. I had a super awkward, horribly written like little speech that he gave, and like I look at it now, I'm like, man, this was really cringy. But then
Oh dear.
which is and then but in the book it's like now there was a much more organic way like hey he's working at this station and
Mm-hmm.
now I got to avoid all of like the unnecessary like dialogue that was there beforehand. Now
Yeah.
he just kind of organically went with them because he's like, you know what, I want more than what can be offered to me here and I'm gonna go on an adventure now, so I'm gonna tag along with you guys. um, and then like with the second one I really played into that because there's actually one of Lucas Spine, he's the author of He Woke Up, um,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of someone that read I would probably say one of the first random people, and I say random just because I don't know him personally through like my personal life, um,
Okay.
but he was like he was one of the first people that like read the book and posted a review about it and talked to me about it. I was like, oh wow. But he liked the character Jalal Tukwe in there. So when I was
Mm.
writing the second one, I was thinking of like ideas of how to expand it, and it's like, you know what? I'm gonna give Jalal his own chapter. And it kind of turned
Mm.
him into like Batman for a minute there, with kind of the things that he did, and then like getting when I was writing the book, at least like especially the first one, I was like, here's how I kind of like expand these characters a little more, and like even like Jalal, like characters that I didn't necessarily think that people um, might not care about as much as other ones. I started finding like, oh no, some people actually care about these characters more, or maybe even I care about them more, and now they're having an
Mm.
expanded role that I didn't necessarily foresee at first.
That's the interesting thing about the development is that you have an idea of what it's going to look like in your head, but when it's all out there on paper, you can see either plot holes or opportunities to add, some depth to characters. And it's even in my own writing, I've found that I'm like, oh, I've got this sussed out. I'm going to write this book one go. It's going to be no problem. And then you get done with the chapter and you think that was terrible. Why? Oh, it was missing this really important thing, or you get something to look over it, and they say, how did that happen? That was random out of nowhere. And have you found that by writing the first book or finishing the first book, when you went into the second book, that you found new ways of writing, new ways of plotting? Obviously we all learn lessons, but did you sort of carry anything new across to the writing of the second book?
Yeah. Kind of going back to what I had said about like feeling the freedom
Mm-hmm.
when writing it, because like the first one, I played more into the rules that I had when I set it, or when I was originally planning it as a game.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was because like, hey, this is the I'm like this is the first story in this entire thing. So a lot of the ideas that I had for the first one, even if they seem like small, like maybe there's a character mentioned there that seems totally like only significant to the first story. Well, they're going to have a larger part to play like later on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the first one still kind of almost had to follow some of the rules that I had set for it when I was thinking of making it a game, which was still kind of restrictive to it.
Mm-hmm.
um, just because it's like, well, this was the groundwork, this is the foundation of the series, so everything has to be set up this way because that's how it works.
Right. Okay.
And like that's how stuff starts playing into the second one. Like you have like maybe I could have done more with, let's say, like Ithaca team in the first one, but no,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of gave them a little like their own chapter again in the second one, but everybody had like a part to play. So I felt more freedom and more comfortable being able to expand upon characters or groups or settings in the
Mm-hmm.
second one. Like the bad guys are a little more present now. There's a reason why like Malaton, the bad guy in the first one, Dawn of the Seekers, is a little more downplayed. That's
Mm-hmm.
just because of what I know what I'm doing with him in the future.
Oh, I
So
see. Okay.
yeah, that's why I like epilogues. um, my not to be like super spoiler or something, but when I brought up one of my friends sent me a message after he got done reading Dawn of the Seekers, and I think it may have been because of something that I posted online. I don't remember, but he was like, I kind of got the feeling that Malaton was like a Thanos level threat, and what you just said kind of confirmed that. I was like, excellent, yes, perfect. So it's some of it's kind of like that slow build up, but you're going to see it pay off down the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I had that fun kind of like going into the Kaltari culture in Shadow the Emperor, because
Mm-hmm.
it's still a story that's focused on Nova Team. uh, we get to see a different side to the Kaltari. We get to explore their culture a little more, their history a little more, and kind of their characters as well. So the two new, the two new Kaltari that are on the cover. Um, Actually, there's three of them. Sorry, but so we explore all three of them, and
Mm-hmm.
we find out why the title of the book is like more personally related to them versus Nova
Mm-hmm.
Team. And so I always like to tie like the title into the story somehow. Like there's a reason for it. It's not just some random thing that I came up with, but it's kind of like the core part of the story, why it's called this. So we see that going into that, but that's again kind of what gave me the freedom, being able to expand upon characters in a way that that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to if it was a game or something, or at least not the way that I wanted to. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely carried that forward going into the second one, um, making it like just expanding the lore in a still a way that made sense, like bite-sized pieces, so I'm not like drowning someone in it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really just getting to explore it more in depth and talk about these characters more. So that was just a lot of fun.
So you finding the same as you're working on book three, then, that you feel more sort of free to be flexible with how you sort of present the information or introduce the characters?
Yeah, and I think a great thing with like going from two to three is that with second one, or sorry, even like one to two, is like with the second one, I didn't have to introduce the characters really again,
Yeah.
because we already did that in the first one. I gave like maybe a brief description of like, hey, here's this guy, this is what he does, but I don't have to go into any more detail because my hopes is that you already read the first one, so you kind of you already have that backstory.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just really like if I gave like a longer introduction or something, it was for a new character. And that's kind
Mhm.
of something that I've carried over into the third one as well. And like I don't have to like the second one maybe I did a little more of an introduction, but the third one now I'm just like, nope, here's the guy, here they are, this is what he does or she does. Let's go with it. Like you already know these characters. We're just really like I'd like to say that almost like they're finding their own, and I think I'm kind of finding my own with the story more. It's like
Mhm.
I can just allow myself to be a little more free of not having to reiterate like, oh, hey, this person does this, but you already knew that because you read the other two, so I don't have to explain that.
Well, it also leaves more space for you to be able to tell the story rather than giving
Exactly.
people the background. So, I mean, it's the same with the TV series. The first few episodes, you're getting to know the characters. That makes a lot of sense. So, we have Dawn of the Seekers, we have Shadow of the Emperor. Are you able to tell us what book 3 is going to be called? Or is it a secret?
No, no, book three. Book three will be titled Brave New Galaxy, and it is again the title relates to things that are happening in the story,
Hmm.
especially with how the second one ends. Like the second one doesn't end on as much of a positive note as the first one did,
Hmm.
so you really and that was actually kind of one of the things that I've loved so much about picking or like starting with the third one is that um, book two, Shadow of the Emperor, starts 3 months after um, Dawn of the Seekers, but book three, Brave New Galaxy, sorry, Brave New
Hmm.
Galaxy picks up like immediately after book two, and
Okay,
so
cool.
that was a lot of fun in just being able to tell the story that way because like the first one like going from one to two it made sense to have that little gap in time there,
Hmm.
and that's what I always planned is that there would be a little bit of a time jump, nothing drastic, just a few months.
Hmm.
So you still kind of get the feel of okay, well here's everything that's happened, the past 3 months and kind of how we got to where the book started. But with book two, it's like I kind of wanted to leave you on kind of that cliffhanger of like, wow, I really don't know what happened to some of these people or what's going to happen next. And book three is like, yep, well, let's pick up right where we left off. I kept you waiting long enough.
That's excellent. So, do you think it's going to end with book 3, or is there more?
No, no. So I've been, I, so I know exactly how many books are going to be in my main like continuity, I should say.
Mhm.
Um, And the simplest way to put it is while I've been working on this for 10 years, there's easily 10 plus years of content. So even even when I was like um, probably within the last month or two, I've actually been thinking of additional stories that I hadn't planned set within this universe because like I'm
Oh,
looking at it and I think it was part of me like I want to say almost tunnel vision at first where I was looking like all right, here's the main continuity, main timeline that I have, right?
yeah.
This is it. But then I was like, you know what? I can actually do a lot more with this, and even explore like different things. Like I do, I'm actually working on kind of the very very um, first ideas, like kind of one of the stories that I thought about that would exist within this universe that's
Mm.
um, not within the golden set of stories. I was like, this would actually work as an audio drama too. So maybe I'll play around with that versus book. Who I'm in the early stages of like kind of working those two up. But no, there's a lot of stories and a lot of ways that I want to expand it. And so I've
Hmm.
kind of got like even thinking about like characters within it that are um, kind of like the central cast of the main story. I'm also thinking about, well, how can I expand them a little more? Like maybe we can get the backstory of this guy, or maybe we can find out what happened in between, point A and point B.
Mhm.
kind of thing. So um, I've really started to expand my I would say probably even my own expectations for what I can do with this.
That's so cool. I think I've seen that other authors of sort of similar styles of writing have done like short story spin-offs of different characters, maybe some of the background characters. Is that something that you'd consider doing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is it's kind of what I've been. If I say too much about the two that I've got like planned right now, it's a little too spoilery
Oh, okay.
for things
Okay,
that I
that's
have
fine.
like planned later on. Um, but no, I've definitely thought about like things that I can do with the characters, and like maybe these like even Eagle Squadron, for example. Like I talk about like, oh, they're the greatest pilots in the UCA, and it's like, okay, but why are they the greatest pilots in the UCA? Let's
Mm.
find out.
It sounds like you have an unending stream of well, you've got a whole universe. In fact, you've got
Right.
multiple universes
Yeah.
that you can play with. So I don't think you're ever going to run out of material from the sounds of it, and that's probably a good thing.
No, and that's kind of what I really loved about like this. Like, not only did like making it a book kind of like allow me the freedom of like how I can expand the story in the second one or the third one, but then I started thinking like, no, you know what? I can really like play upon this and start going and venturing into other like um artistic medias that I want to play into. Let's say like the audio drama, or even like if I learn animation one day, maybe I could make like an animated short or something. So the possibilities that I see in my head are endless. They are only limited to the capabilities that I allow myself to have.
You must allow yourself to have everything
Exactly.
because you have it in you, and as you say, the only thing that is stopping you is yourself. And
Right.
the worst thing that will happen is you either can't understand it, so you don't end up learning it, or you put it out there and nobody sees it. But at least you tried, at least you did it,
Exactly.
at least you took a chance. And if you hadn't have taken a chance finishing book one and going self-published, we wouldn't be here talking. So my advice to you is to just do it anyway. See what
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah, that no, that's a great model. Just do it. And that's really essentially, yeah,
Yeah.
if you have a dream or like an idea that you want to go with, like honestly just do it. Like I'm a huge gamer, obviously, so I listen to
Mm-hmm.
the official Xbox podcast, and there was an episode that came out a number of years ago, like probably like two, three, four, I don't know, at this point. But one of the hosts on there, Jeff Rubenstein, he said, "If you dream it, you can do it."
Mm-hmm.
And I've really carried that quote with me like ever since that day, because that really like when I heard him say that, I was like, that kind of like gave me the courage, the encouragement to be able to be like, yep, you know, he's right. I can either sit around and talk about what I want to do and encourage others to go out and follow their own like dreams and passions, or I can take my own advice and actually do it. So that's really what I did, and like like that quote helped me to finish up college that I was going to. It helped me to finish up
Mm.
the book, obviously, and now I just like I wear that quote like a badge of honor, because I'm like this like him saying that day, like that's exactly what I needed to hear at the time that I needed to hear it.
That's cool.
So yeah.
I love it when stuff works out like that and you're like, oh, yes, I'm on the right path. This is good.
Right.
Um, so, something I wanted to talk about, hopefully, it's not going to give away any spoilers for Dawn of the Seekers, but you did include a section around sort of AI within the history of the universe, which is a hot topic at the moment. And I was just curious when you added that into the book and why you
Yeah.
added it into the book.
So I've got a real funny reason why it's in there, and then I
Tell
have
me I
a
love comedy.
yeah. So there's the funny reason of why it's in there, and then there's how it evolved into to what it was. I
Okay.
actually got I was actually getting to the very end of writing Dawn of the Seekers, and I don't remember if I had finished it and I was in like the editing process, or
Mhm.
if I was close to finishing it. No, I think I was close to finishing it, and I was just kind of like reviewing, editing one of the something that I had written, but it pun intended dawned on me that yeah, I was like on like chapter 14 or 15, and then I was just like, oh, I forgot about AI. And like when you're looking at science fiction, normally one of the key staples in any science fiction story is an AI character,
Mhm.
or about how AI helps. Like Halo, you have Cortana, Serena, BB, something like that.
Mhm.
Mass Effect, you had Edie, the Geth, and like Star Trek, you had the computer aboard the
Mhm.
Enterprise. And I was sitting there and I was just looking at this. I was like, oh gosh, I forgot one of the like key elements to a story that, or like a science fiction story that makes it science fiction. I was like, how could I have? It's like, how did I do this? And part of that is like also I'm thinking like I know how I'm kind of like handling AI in the future
Mhm.
of the Celestial Saga, but I'm like, this doesn't explain anything now. So I was like, I was thinking like, do I go back and find something that a character said and change that to be like, oh, the shipboard AI said blah blah blah,
Mhm.
or I was like, no, that seems too cheap to only have it like pop up once and that
Mhm.
be it. So I was like, huh. So I just kind of like sat there for a second thinking about it, and this was really around the time when um last year when the whole like AI art quote unquote debate really started coming into light, and people were
Mhm.
being very vocal about it, and I was like, you know what, here's how I put AI in the story and that it's banned. Because I was looking at it like one of the things that I did with humanity specifically in this, or even the timeline of the story overall, is that when I originally planned the story, I had it set in, I want to say the 2200s, I
Okay.
believe. um, but then it occurred to me, I was like, wait, this is too close to the Star Trek timeline. And given so I was like, and even given like the current state of like technology and space exploration, like it's, we aren't like progressing in as much as like I would like to see in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So thinking like realistically, I was like, I don't think that we'd be capable of doing some of the things that I have in my head, um like 200 years from now, or
Mhm.
even making sense to where like humanity would kind of be like on top of things. And that's one of the things I also wanted to do differently for this, is that a lot of times humanity is either seen as like the weakest or like lowest species, out, not
Mm.
the most advanced. But I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna make humanity be like the top dog who actually helps people, which is where the whole like exploration, advancement, peace slogan came from. um,
Oh, okay.
but it but going back to the AI part, I was like just thinking about like the debate right now and how like AI art steals from actual artists,
Mhm.
and how it's kind of got like a negative perception right now. But I could definitely see humanity as a whole becoming like over reliant on AI, like doing things, which is basically
Mm.
what I had put into the story. Like, hey, we had AI running everything, but also given what I know about people, it's like there's a lot of people out there that probably wouldn't treat like an actual like AI that has like its own thoughts and processing capabilities and stuff. I don't think they'd treat it like respectfully, like it was another person or something. And
Mhm.
eventually, that AI, much like a person, would probably snap, which is exactly what happened in the
Yeah.
book in the past. So I had to get to a point where humanity was over reliant on AI, did not treat
Yeah.
AI respectfully, and were basically almost pushed to the point of extinction.
Mm.
And that's what brought people together, got everyone working on the same page. And then it was like, hey, we should probably ban this technology, which is what they did.
Honestly, it was. It's a. I was. As I was reading it, I was like, "This is a fear of mine." Oh, he's got inside my head, which is
Right.
why when I avoid it at all costs, but it's sort of integrated into our life. Sometimes unknowingly, especially if you don't look for it on purpose. If I'm interacting with any kind of computer now, I say please and thank you just in case.
Right.
What if it remembers I was rude? Um,
Exactly.
I think that putting in um, elements of technological advances in present day and taking the real fears of real people that are going to be reading your book was such a good move, because it makes something that is sort of almost out of reach of the from the reader. I mean, in 300 years, when people are still reading this book, it might be like, oh, back in the old days. But
Yeah. Like,
but for now,
look at this peasant and what he thought things were going to be like.
I mean, we thought we were going to have hoverboards by this point, so we're kind of
Right.
we're letting ourselves down and using it for the wrong things. Anyway, um,
Right.
but yeah, for those who are reading it, that's like a real concern and a real fear for people. So even in this like fantastic world of fiction, there are elements where, oh, maybe that could actually happen and that might be real. The way that you integrated it into the story was really good. So as you say, rather than just using the same like, oh, there's AI here now, la la la, having it as like an integral part of the history of the characters is was awesome, and I really really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was it started as a joke, but then it just turned into like, yeah, well, what if we did have to fear our, robot overlords? What would happen? So the it was just, and that's actually kind of how I kind of what expanded. I want to say it's chapter 7.
Mm.
Actually, I got it sitting right next to me. Uh, Am I correct on the chapter? Yeah, chapter 7 in Dawn of the Seeker's history lesson, where we learned about that with the AI.
Hmm.
It kind of expanded on that, because at first I only had it as the real reason why I wrote that chapter is because I wanted the one line or like 2 lines at the very end where it was like Malaton smiled. It was like, if the bad guy is smiling here, there's a problem. But I was like, I don't want to make an entire chapter where that's literally like 4 lines and it's done. Um, and I was thinking like, okay, well, at the end of the previous chapter it doesn't fit well, at the end or at the beginning of the next chapter it doesn't fit well. So I'm like, how do I put it where I want it, but um, not just have one chapter be 4 lines? And so it started off with just being a brief history of the Kaltari. And so I
Mm.
kind of went into that, and then I was like, once I got further into the book and realized, oh, I forgot about AI, then my brain started rolling. It was like, let's go back and change this into a kind of like history of the galaxy, catch some people up on some things that have happened over the last 700 years and kind of how we got here.
Well, it was wildly helpful because, again, for someone like me that reads books quicker than they should, I don't savor the words, which is quite shameful to say. Seems like my whole shtick is to support writers. I enjoy the story. I'm there for the ride. I'm there for the story, and it didn't feel like it was shoehorned in. As sometimes people are like, oh, I want to add this thing in, and they just squeeze it in there, and it wasn't laboured. So yeah, you did a great job with that. So something I did want to ask you is, you've sort of told me about your influences in TV and books, movies, and games. How do you stop yourself from taking an idea and basically copy pasting, because it's all fantastical, isn't it? It's fiction, it's science fiction. So for me, my non-science fiction brain, although I love sci-fi movies and TV, um, I can't possibly understand how you can take something that kind of exists and then make it your own. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. So there's obviously like you can see a lot of the influences in here, and some of them I didn't necessarily realize at
Mm.
first. Specifically, like there was even if we talk about like the cover of the book.
Yeah.
So the cover of the book made by the fantastic Uzuri Art, who's doing the covers for the entire Celestial Saga. So I'm super happy about that.
Oh, they're
Um,
phenomenal. I love them.
I I was like when I was originally thinking about it, I was like, well, I was thinking of more of like a movie poster, like what you would think on like the movie poster side. I imagined it as kind of like that Star Wars style poster where you see the main characters on there, maybe some that you have no idea who they are, and kind of like the central focus of the story. That's who makes the cover. Um, which is what I rolled with. And I know this is not typically like probably not your typical book cover that you look at, uh, but I was like, I may never get a chance to see the movie poster, so I'm going all out and putting it on the cover because that's what I want to do. And so,
Mhm.
but I had two friends say like, man, this really they in my head I was looking at it like, yeah, this is my Star Wars, style movie poster, but two people pointed out to me, they're like, man, this reminds me of like the cover for Mass Effect. And I was like, I am absolutely not disappointed by that because Mass Effect is like my favorite thing ever. um,
What a
but
lovely
when
compliment.
Yeah. And so when I was kind of reading like some of the things that I looked at a lot, um, were like in science fiction you have like a lot of times it's presented like a super soldier, like maybe
Mhm.
they have like an enhanced suit or enhanced abilities, something like that. Which is kind of the cool thing about Mass Effect is that Commander Shepard, they're kind of a regular person, like their suit adds on to that, but it's still like take the suit away, they're a normal human being unless they're biotic, then they can move things with their mind.
Mhm.
um, and that's kind of I wanted to avoid that with this story. So I would say that while there's influences in here, uh, a lot of the like main things that you might see within it, I wanted to kind of stay away from because that was kind of the main thing is that I wanted someone who thinks of themselves as like me. Like there's not really anything special about like I don't possess wild abilities. I'm not like ridiculously smart, fast, or something like that.
Mhm.
And I specifically said that like, hey, these people in the special forces of the United Celestial Alliance, they're also maybe not the fastest, bravest, smartest, something like that.
Mhm.
They're just normal people that you would see walking down the street. And that's really what I wanted to push into the book is like, well, if you're someone that feels the way that I do, you're reading this, you might be able to relate to the character more because they don't have that magic suit of armor that gives them fantastical abilities, or they don't have like abilities of their own where they're able to like reach out with the force or something. And so I would say that some of my like favorite things influence me in a way to avoid them, but also
Mm.
kind of keep in those similarities. Like you can see the influences. And I actually recently started a playthrough of Mass Effect again, and like Mass Effect 2, my favorite game of all time.
Mhm.
And as I was just like even just walking around in that, I was like, wow, it's really hitting me how much this story like not only impacted me as like a um, like just for what I like in a game, but it just kind of really changed the course of my entire life. And like
Hmm.
being now that I've written two books, I could really look back at it and be like, wow, this really influenced me a lot more than I thought. Just maybe with like how the characters interact with each other or how like events are played out, keeping it. What's the right word for this? Keeping it intimate and between characters, but also expanding it to where it can fit like multiple people at the same time. Um,
Mm.
just seeing that, and then having like one of my friends actually posted this review, and I did not tell him to say this. This was all his own. He was like, talking about the main characters, like Nova Team reminded him of the squad from Mass Effect 2 or
Mhm.
like Spartans from Halo. And I was like, man, this is fantastic. That this kind of like camaraderie and teamwork is yeah, making people think of the things that kind of influenced me to write that, because I did want to write like, hey, here's a team, and they're not just like, hey, we're a team, we have to do this because we're a team. No, it's they're working as a team because they're family. Some of them more so than others, but
Mm.
just seeing that point being put across, and the the points that I wanted to put in there, or that I really wanted to get across, is resonating with people. Like that was special to me to be able to read that. But it is kind of funny to see like even ideas that I have might not necessarily be the same, or they're not exclusive to me essentially, and it's not something that I want to copy and paste. But the funny thing is, Star Wars: The Last Jedi,
Mhm.
there's actually a scene in there, where something happens, and I remember watching it on screen for the first time. I was like, oh, this is the idea that I had, So eventually down the line, you're going to read that and people will be like, oh, he got this from Star Wars. I'm like, no, I actually had it like a year or two before that movie actually came out. But I can't prove that obviously other than telling people about this idea that I had. So
I
it's still
believe you.
something I'm 100% going to keep in there. But it's going to be funny to see it. So like, yeah, like there's some things that I kind of really like looked at the influences and played into it, like the ships. Even like um if I look at Star Trek, the first thing, like if you think about a ship in Star Trek, first thing that comes to mind is the Enterprise. If
Hmm.
you think about Mass Effect, odds are you're probably going to think about the Normandy. And so I wanted to portray that like kind of aspect, like when you have science fiction, like ships are a big part of it, and the
Hmm.
ship, the flagship of the series, is kind of like a character in and of its own. So
Hmm.
I have the Everstar, and I feel a certain way for this ship because it's been in my head for so long.
Hmm.
um, I'm like, this is its own character, which is why throughout all the books I don't refer to it as the ship. I may have only done it like once or twice just because the sentence wouldn't have flowed well otherwise. But every time throughout it, it's like I mentioned the Everstar by name because I want I want the reader to think like, oh, I'm not looking at this as another ship within a fleet. No, this is the ship that I'm supposed to be focused on. And so things that are happening to it, like maybe the crew is feeling a certain way, but then I bring in like, oh, well, here's how the Everstar is feeling in this certain way because it just got the crap kicked out of it, and now we gotta talk about like what's happening with her, what's going on with her.
Hmm.
So seeing seeing how you can feel for a ship like Star Trek, something happens to the Enterprise, it's like, man, that really sucks. I really like the Enterprise. Something
Hmm.
like Mass Effect, they loved doing that. They were like, hey, here's the Normandy, all that time you spend with it, first 5 minutes of the second game it gets blown up, congratulations. um, so then it was like you had the wonderful, impactful scene of the Normandy reborn later on in the game.
Hmm.
But that's how I felt watching these. It's like, man, that really sucks that we just lost the Normandy. Oh, hey, we got it back. So I wanted to show that with like the Everstar. Like if the Everstar is damaged in any way or something happens to it, it's like, man, this really sucks because I really liked it.
Mm.
What's going to happen to it next? And the kind of influence from the Kelvin timeline, especially 2009 Star Trek, kind of inspired the overall like look of the ships. At least the exterior. Like I wanted them to be more like shiny, reflective,
Mhm.
new looking, um, and the inside as well. Like I wanted to be brightly lit, not like the original Star Trek series. The interior of the ships were relatively dark.
Mhm.
But then Kelvin timeline, everything was like white paneling along it, bright lights, and well, it looked cleaner, fresher to me. And I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
I don't want people walking around like a dimly lit starship because that seems kind of gloomy when you're spending your life aboard it. So I wanted to be like well lit and the ship to look good because I don't know, having a name like the Everstar and then talking about how the sun is glistening off of it, making it look like a star. I'm like, yeah, this is how I want the ships to look. And so the 2009 Star Trek kind of inspired it with that. But
That's cool.
also, I think just kind of going into the fantastical, like when I was writing Dawn of the Seekers, there's like a fight scene where I like they're like, oh, they've got swords now. Like Malaton's Red Guard like takes out swords. I was like, one of the coolest things from 2009 Star Trek was when Sulu pulled out his katana and it
Mhm.
extended out of there. And of course, Star Wars with lightsabers. I was like, I'm going to give them swords just because I can.
Space swords. No, I
Yeah,
love it. I
and
love
it,
it. We
it
we love a good weapon in sci-fi.
right,
Big
and
fan
I
of
think
it.
it also played into like Malaton as a character as a whole. Like he was a little more traditional with the Keltari culture, so his armor, it wasn't like flashy or form fitting. It was large. I mean, there's a reason why his was larger, but if you
Mhm.
looked at his like personal guard, they were more like traditional type armor that you wouldn't expect them to be like wearing at the time. Um, but even like the influences for it, like the armor in general, like the N7 armor from like Mass Effect Andromeda, like Andromeda had some amazing armor. And I was like, well, that's what inspired the look of the armor in my head. So that's what inspired it here. So I think there's a fine line where you can pay homage to your favorites and not copy them 100% because there's still something there that makes it your own.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, speaking with you today and also reading the first book, I can tell that a huge amount of care and time has been taken to make this right. And just hearing the level of detail that you think that you yourself as the writer think about each character, each element of the story, is one of the reasons why I wanted to read this book in the first place, because I've been in contact with you via social media, and we've also worked on your author feature for Indiosyncrasy, and I don't know, I think I'm hoping that listeners will hear the passion and the thought and the drive and the why behind your work and give it a go, because again, as I've said earlier, I'm not much of a sci-fi writer, but this is a fantastic book for anyone to read, even if you're not a massive sci-fi fan. And if you are a
I
big
really
sci-fi
appreciate you saying
fan,
that.
of course, and if you are a big sci-fi fan, boy howdy, are there some Easter eggs. So I think that your book, your work has such a wide appeal, and I just wanted to make sure that I said that before I ended the recording at all, because anyone that is listening, I wouldn't want them to think that if they're not a fan of sci-fi, then they're not going to get it or that they're not going to enjoy it, because I don't think that's right at all. But yeah, no, this it's been a fantastic time talking with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sort of take a chance on this podcast and to share your process, because I know the process of writing is quite intimate and it can be emotional and it means a lot. And putting yourself out there, especially if you're an indie writer such as yourself, whether you're self-published or um, other indie writers who go through small presses and indie presses, you have to do a lot of the singing and dancing yourself. You have to put yourself out there and say, this is good, you must read it, it's amazing, you're going to love it. So I'm hoping that getting to know you better will help to sort of find readers that want to take a chance on another indie author. So thank you so much for coming today. For listeners who don't know who you are or that haven't sort of looked at where they can find your work, where can they find you? Do you have social media? Where's the best place to buy your books?
No, absolutely. So, well, first off, I just want to say thank you to you for having me on the podcast and like even starting this in general, because I know like with social media, like it just people just randomly pop up into your timeline, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like very glad that you had randomly popped up in there one day. And we started like conversing and everything, and just seeing how you have taken the idea that you had for like idiosyncrasy and booked, and how quickly you've gotten this off the ground is like that is amazing and incredible. So
Oh, thank you.
congratulations to that. But you have been such a like positive light within like the indie community, like writing community in general, because like there's a lot of negativity out there in the world, but you
Oh,
are always posting something positive, always being positive on the timeline, and I was like, that is something that people need. So I appreciate that. Like it has helped me on more than one occasion, so thank you
oh,
very much for that.
you're so
um,
welcome.
but as for me, you can find me on pretty much every social media that's out there right now.
I will put
It's
links in the
just too
description.
many. Yeah, there's like Blue Sky, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter,
Uh,
some Threads, Instagram, all under A O'Connor author.
okay.
My website is Alex O'Connor. Is it? Yes, alexoconnorauthor.com. Um, and there you can find Crafting the Celestial Saga, which is like my blog post where I'm doing like a behind the scenes look
Mm-hmm.
at the series and everything, because again I love behind the scenes featurettes for like movies and games. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that to kind of like give someone an insight of the way that my golden retriever brain works.
Excellent.
But yeah, I think that. Oh, and then my books are on Amazon. The first two are on there. Third one's coming out in the fall of 2025.
Amazing.
And yeah, I think that covers it.
Perfect. And also, by the time this episode comes out, Indiosyncrasy will be live, so you can also see Alex's author feature on there. And the date that this podcast releases will be during the week of your time on the front page. So hopefully, if you listen to this on the day that it comes out and you go on to www.indiosyncrasy.com, you will see Alex's lovely, happy, smiley face on the front page. So yeah, thank you again for today, and I am very excited to see where this story goes next.
Oh, thank you very much. And again, thank you for having me here and everything that you're doing. And I'm really looking forward to being able to see what you do with Indiosyncrasy.
Thank you so much.
So, thank you.